no filter, no airstone, no water flow, and no water changes? Is that actually possible? Has LRB cracked the code? Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, this is Bentley. Today we're going to talk about the tail end of the filter series. We've talked about why filters suck and why filters are awesome, so that we can have kind of an open conversation, think about both sides as to each given filter type in a more compact, like, here's all the bad, here's all the good type video. And to curtail and kind of finish this series, I want to talk about the filterless aquarium. Probably most people are going to associate a filterless aquarium with something like the Wallstad tank or a dirted tank. These aren't necessarily designed to be filterless, but they're going to share something in common with the same thing that Lucas Bretz does, LRB Aquatics, for those who are not familiar with him, somehow. He has a massive fish room in Florida where he is doing no filter, no airstones, plants, and sometimes algae, depending on the tank. He has tanks where he specifically grows algae in a good amount for the purpose of the aquarium. Not no water changes, but minimal water changes. Lucas does suggest, you'll see this in his videos, and I even emailed Lucas ahead of time asking him, hey, are you okay with me talking about this? And we'll have some footage from Lucas's fish room here. That's all used with permission from Lucas. Thank you very much, Lucas. I really appreciate you, buddy. But he advocates at least some water changes for the plants, not for the fish, for the plants. And Lucas keeps rainbow fish, which many of us rainbow fish keepers are often almost preaching to you to do a 50% water change at like a weekly basis, a very, very regular basis. So let's talk about this concept, effectively speaking, the filterless aquarium, and how it can and cannot work. I think there are some really important things that we need to keep in mind. One, you need this stuff behind me, plants. And the reason why is without that airstone, without something moving the water around so you're getting gas exchange at the surface, and without some kind of filtration method, right? You need something to consume the ammonia and the nitrite and produce nitrate, which is significantly safer. And hopefully you're going to have something for consuming that nitrate if you're going to do limited water changes. And that's where plants come in. Because as they consume the nitrate that is produced by your beneficial bacteria, and you will have beneficial bacteria, every surface in an aquarium is going to have beneficial bacteria. But to have that really good, effective beneficial bacteria that turns ammonia to nitrite and then to nitrate, you need oxygen. You need aerobic bacteria. That's where the plants come in again. When they're photosynthesizing, they're going to produce oxygen. So they're kind of doing all the work. And this is where some people will look at something like a Wallstad style tank where you have usually plants, not necessarily a filter, but often most Wallstad tanks do have some kind of water movement or a small filter. But the plants are the ones doing all of the work. And this is where this is really important. You're not going to do this with zero plants and have no water changes and no filter and no nothing and your fish survive. That's not going to happen. And in the case of tropical fish, if you're not in a climate that is conducive to that kind of warm temperature naturally, whether that's you're heating the room or maybe you live in Florida like Lucas, you're going to need some kind of heat. And if you're using a tank heater, you need some water flow to disperse that heat reasonably well. Otherwise, you risk burning the heater out significantly faster. So this is where we need to look at the things that are caveats, okay? Another example that I want to bring into this of where people might see this method and try it and have catastrophic potential failure. In Florida, right, you have this very mineral-rich water that naturally has good levels of general hardness, so mineral content, and carbonate hardness, which carbonate hardness is helping stabilize our pH. But if you were doing that with my water in the Northwest, where there is basically nothing in our water and almost no KH coming out of the tap, very quickly, as that natural process of the bacteria converting those harmful chemicals, ammonia and nitrite, into nitrate. As they do that, they consume small amounts of the carbonate hardness. And if you don't have carbonate hardness in your tank and your water naturally, and you're not buffering it somehow, you will eventually run into pH crash because your carbonate hardness will get too low, pH will no longer be able to maintain itself, and if you have very soft water like me, and when that happens, game over. Fish gone. And people will be like, I heard this and that and had success. This is where caveats matter. The type of water that Lucas is dealing with is more conducive to this style and mentality, philosophy, whatever you want, when it comes to how his tanks are set up. Now, in the case of some of his other tanks, he has a lot of algae. Algae is just doing the same job as the plants. It's consuming waste products, which in the end is usually the nitrate. And algae is actually fairly good at consuming a nitrate when you have large amounts of like string or hair algae. It might not look as pretty to some people, but algae is a simpler structure, so it doesn't need as many nutrients as the plants do, so you can get away with basically no fertilizer. You just need the fish. And one of the other things that's important to note here is if you're not doing water changes, or at least you're doing minimal water changes, which is what Lucas suggests, is you need some water changes, just not maybe as frequently as most people will say, and we're not using things to move the water around, that means we also need to pay attention to the density of things consuming oxygen. You're not going to want to have, in a 40-gallon breeder, let's say, 100 fish, because they're probably going to consume more oxygen than the plants can realistically generate, especially in tropical temperatures where as our heat rises, our water can hold less and less oxygen. So if you're trying to do the system where it's completely reliant on plants, you're going to want more minimal stocking. So an example would be, and we look at a lot of Lucas's plants, we don't see them like crazy dense with fish, right? It isn't like when you look at his breeding tanks, like you would say someone like Master Breeder Dean. Where you look at Master Breeder Dean's raising tanks and where all the babies are, you'll see tons and tons and tons of babies in a 20-gallon tank. But he's doing lots of water changes, he's got filtration going on, he's keeping a more sterile environment. Where if we look at Lucas's tanks, right, we'll see less raw fish in there, even when there's a bunch of babies. For the amount of water that's in the tank and the plants and things, we're not seeing these huge, super dense numbers of babies. This creates an ecosystem. What he's doing is trying to recreate, in a very small form, nature, and letting nature do its thing. And in the case, as long as you are paying attention to certain caveats, like if you have very soft water, this can be very difficult to do. But if you have more mineral-rich water, you use lots of plants, you don't have really heavy stocking, and either you're heating the room or you have natural temperatures that keep that temperature in a tolerable range for your fish, then it becomes possible. Here's the biggest downside. To run an aquarium in this fashion takes experience and knowledge. Good knowledge. And this is where I think it's not friendly for beginners, and why I would say do not do this. Personally, I would say never do this. And it's not because it doesn't work or it's dangerous. It's because the amount of fish keeping knowledge it takes to understand things and identify and figure out, whether it's trends or just looking at a tank and knowing it is time for that water change now. Now I need to do a water change. Now I need to do this, or maybe I don't have the plant density necessary to produce enough oxygen, but you're not watching the fish just die, right? To where you can make some small adjustments, but overall follow that philosophy. I think for a beginner or maybe even an intermediate fish keeper, this is likely to spell disaster. Guaranteed? No. You can have success with this. But I think there are lots of potential scenarios where we could run into problems. Lucas knows what he's doing. Obviously. He's been doing it for a long time. He used to be kind of a tank hoarder. I mean, the man had like 400 tanks at one point, maybe more. So obviously he's skilled at what he does. He does fish, effectively speaking, for a living, right? So he is constantly tending to his fish, tending to his tanks. He's able to monitor them more constantly. He's selling fish, so he's not just like continuously building up populations, right? He's got fish going out, so that thins down those populations and makes it more sustainable. And in that case, can you do that? Yeah. Is it the best, perfect solution to all things? Probably not. But it's a solution for some people. And that's what I think is the most important lesson in this entire filter series. And that's what I really wanted to get to in talking about this. So I hope you've stayed this long. Filtration methods all have their positives and negatives. Even the no filter or filterless aquarium method has its negatives and positives. And what it really comes down to is, what is the right set of negatives and positives, pros and cons, for you? Based on the maintenance you want to do, the type of fish you want to keep, the amount of work you want to do, what is the best solution for you? Are you on a budget and keep mostly small tanks with fairly light stocking? A basic sponge filter is probably all you need. It's not very costly, it can do the job very well, or maybe you want like a box filter. Are you trying to do a big, beautiful display tank with super clear water, huge density of fish? You might want to look at something like a canister filter or a sump. Maybe you're somewhere in between. You like lots of plants like I do. You might have a good number of fish. Well, then you need some more potent type of filtration, but you don't necessarily need something really crazy because the plants are going to help you. It just becomes a matter of, do you care about that perfectly polished water? Do you not like the sight of equipment? Do you like the sight of equipment? Does it just help you keep track of things? Whatever that may be, find that balance of things, and that's going to point you toward a good filtration method. All of the filters we've talked about, and even some of the ones we haven't, will do the job if we make sure that we think about it ahead of time and realize what we need that aquarium to be able to do and fit the filtration to the need of the aquarium. That's it. That's the actual lesson. Like a lot of things that I've talked about, whether it's in some of my plant talks where I talk about, like, think about the needs of the plants and then build your aquarium around it, right? Or similarly, you know, the Eric Bodrock, be the fish. What does the fish need? Okay, build the aquarium around what the fish needs. We're building a small ecosystem. And in that, we need to account for these things because mistakes do happen. Sometimes stress occurs in our fish, and sometimes illness will occur. Even with a tank that has been stable for a long period of time, you can have unknown stressors that you might not realize that can impact them, and something can go wrong. But if you account for what is most likely to happen, oh, I'm going to have a lot of plants, but, mostly just Java fern. They don't grow really aggressive, and they're easy for me to grow, so that I don't need a super strong light. And I probably need a filter to move the water around, but do I need a super powerful filter, or will air filtration be enough? Well, how many fish do I want to put in, and what type of fish? And then once you figure those things out, it's that balance. You are building that ecosystem. When you build the ecosystem and think about it like that, every filtration method can be successful as long as we think about what we're building in its entirety and then pick the right solution for us, for you. Don't want to buy some big fancy canister filter? You don't need to. You can get similar performance out of a hang-on pack. If you do the right methodology of air filtration, you can get that kind of performance too. If you're not putting 400 fish in a 40-gallon breeder and you're only going to put like 10, you don't need a crazy powerful filter. You don't. You're only filtering enough for 10 fish, right? And if you're giving plants, you basically only need something to move the water around. the plants can probably do the work as long as you're not dumping like half a thing of food in every time, right? It's all about how we set the collective up together. And that is where we can find the right solution. For Lucas Bretz, he's putting in a water change system. But other than that, he doesn't do water changes all that often. He doesn't use filters. You see all these tanks with all these baby fish and very healthy fish, healthy plants, in some cases healthy algae, right? Because he's got tanks where he specifically cultivates algae because for certain fish, it's great for the babies, right? But as long as you are doing the right set of things together, and that's all dependent on us, right? I'm a rainbow fish person who likes planted tanks. In some cases, I like having the extra flow of a canister filter. Many of my tanks have hang-on backs, but I also have tanks that have been air-powered at one point or are air-powered right now. You can find success with every filtration method, and that is what I think is the most important lesson here. It all comes down to what fits you. And what I would finally say is what fits your experience level. If you're not super experienced, consider a more powerful or simpler, maybe even, filtration method that helps you learn. Sponge filters can work great, but if you don't want to like deal with the way that it is to maintain them, maybe just get a simple hang-on-the-back filter. If you need that extra water movement, or you like the way it looks with that extra water movement, try a hang-on-back. You don't want to necessarily maintain that filter super often. You don't want to do it once every 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, consider a canister filter. But if your budget won't allow a canister filter, you're going to have to buck up and do maintenance a little more often. That's all it is. It's those kind of things that help us find success. And in the end, every filter sucks and every filter is awesome. It's all about how we use it. That's it, guys. That is what I have for you. Thank you so much for joining me on the filter series. Let me know in the comments down below. Of all the filters we've talked about and even the Lucas Bretz kind of method, what's the thing that you like the most? Or maybe the one that you tried once and you'll never go back to. I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Whether you are a lord of the sump, you are the truest believer in grandpa's like plastic plates under the gravel, or that little bitty plastic box, right? Whatever it may be. Or maybe you're like, I like the fanciest widgets and gadgets I can get. Bring me that $1,200 ADA filter. I need your budget, by the way. But seriously, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed this series, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And again, a massive thank you to Lucas Bretz for letting me use a little bit of the footage from his videos and the picture of his amazing fish room and panorama that is the thumbnail. So again, thank you, Lucas. You're the best, man. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome.